After an encounter I had a few days ago, I'm not sure who to turn to for help. I'm just a normal college student. I'd gone out that day with messy hair pressed into a tight bun on my head and wearing an old hoodie in hopes of getting through that day. My sweatpants had been slept in from the night before, and I was sure I hadn't showered in the last 24 hours. That didn't stop me from going out and trying to be productive. I sat in my favorite coffee shop and drank the ridiculously overpriced mess of sugar and cream as I rushed to finish my term paper. I was running out of inspiration and had gotten up to refill my cup. That's when I almost fell on my ass. A pair of strong arms had encircled my waist before I had broken my tailbone. I looked up at my savior, and my heart nearly leapt from my throat. He was beautiful. The perfect amount of stubble was left on his face from a shave. His hair was jet black and neat. Impressive blue eyes bore into mine as he grinned at me. "Whoa, are you okay?" I laughed nervously, looking and feeling like an idiot. I brushed myself off and turned to him in thanks. "I'm sorry. I'm a bit of a klutz. I didn't mean to bother you." He shrugged and grinned again, holding out a gloved hand. "My name is David." I took his hand in mine. The glove was cold. Maggie. Maggie. That's a beautiful name. You're beautiful." I blushed and turned away from him, trying to conceal my embarrassment. Boys don't usually talk to me that way. Seeing how he was just standing there, I pointed back at my booth. "I'm just working on a paper for class. Do you want to sit with me?" He nodded, eyes lighting up a bit in my invitation. We ended up talking for hours. I really started to like David. He was interesting. He seemed very different from other men I talked to. As I explained my paper to him, he seemed way too interested. Usually people call me boring when I speak about school. His expressions were too genuine to be faking it. As I noticed it was getting dark, I excused myself. "It was amazing to meet you, David. Can we do it again?" "Of course. I had a great time with you. I'd very much like to meet up with you again." His smile stretched across his face, eyes twinkling. I gave him my cell phone number and hoped to get a call or a text sometime after. Nothing happened. Feeling rejected, I decided I didn't care anything about David. Although I'd felt a spark with him, it was better for my heart and self-esteem that I had forgotten about him. I didn't go back to the coffee shop for 2 weeks. Another paper was threatening to kick my ass, and I had to go back to the place so I could concentrate. My apartment felt too hot and cramped. Walking in, my eyes went wide. David sat at the same booth we had met before. His eyes were cloudy and unfocused. David?" His face snapped back at me, his grin wide and happy. "Maggie, you're back." Yeah, I have another paper." "Were you waiting for me?" He frowned. Should I not have? I wasn't sure how to feel about that. David had waited in the same spot for 2 weeks for me to come back. "Why didn't you call or text me? I did leave you my number." His brows lifted in confusion before he let out a laugh. "Oh, I'm not sure how to use a telephone. I'm sorry." "Oh, well, that's okay. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of that." He just shrugged and moved over for me to sit beside him. We ended up spending that day together again. All the strangeness that I had felt before had melted away when we were together. It was weird. Being with David put me at ease. All my other emotions were gone when I was talking to him. I'd even gotten my papers done in record time. I wanted to be with him more. The coffee shop closing made me aware of our surroundings. Would you like to go to a movie with me or dinner? I'm not really good at this sort of thing. He put a gloved hand on my cheek. I'd love to, Maggie. We'd made plan to go to dinner a few days later. I tried to fight pissing myself in fear. What was I doing? Boys didn't like me like this. I wasn't the type of girl who went out with people like David. As the day approached, I gathered up my courage. David had to like me, right? He had to think of me as attractive. He had waited for me for 2 weeks to speak to me again. What other girl could say a man did that for them? Adorning my favorite outfit, I met David for dinner. He wore the same grin with a mismatched suit and tie. I guess you could say it looked silly. I thought it was adorable. The conversation between us was easy. I felt like I could talk to him about anything and everything. He never seemed to judge or make fun of any of my admissions. As it got late, I held up my hand for the check. I did technically ask you here myself. I'll pay. His expression was cool and collected. While he had ordered the first thing on the menu, he hadn't touched any of it. The waiter had boxed his food for him. I'm not hungry, he'd given as an excuse. I believed him and shrugged it off. I'd never seen him order anything at the coffee shop. Maybe he was shy about eating in front of others. I could understand that. Hand in hand, he insisted on taking me back to my apartment. I had a great time. I could feel my cheeks turning pink at my confession. He looked down at me and squeezed my hand. I had a great time, too. There's something I'd like to show you, back at my place. His voice had dropped, his eyes clouding over in what I assumed was lust. As he pulled me towards the direction of his place, my nerves started to get the better of me. I did like him. He had been an amazing date. The rational part of me was telling me not to sleep with him on the first date, no matter how bad I wanted to. As we stopped at his apartment building, I dropped his hands. I can't do this, David. His eyes shot up in shock. You can't? Why not? I bit my lip and looked away from him. I just don't know if I'm ready for something like this with you. This is a lot. His face suddenly dropped. His usual smile was replaced by a scowl. His features didn't seem right. He began to look like someone else. Someone I didn't know. You have to come up. He grabbed my hand and attempted to pull me up the stairs. Looking at the apartment building, I noticed how dismayed it was. Nobody could have been living there for years. I kicked and fought at his grip, as his grip tightened around me. His gloved hands dug into my flesh of my arm. I swear I could feel the gloves burning onto my skin. I screamed as I tried to fight and kick him. Nothing seemed to be working. Tears fell down my face and all hope left me. The sound of a car horn blowing in the distance caught his attention. His grip loosened just enough for me to escape. I gathered myself enough to run down the street and away from him. I could hear him yelling my name and begging me to come back. Daring to glance back, I noticed 2 black figures whirling where his arms should have been. I'm not sure when I got home. I just felt like my feet seemed to be taking me there on their own. Coming back into my room, I cried on my bed for hours. Looking at my arm, I noticed obvious burn scars. They were shaped like fingerprints. A ping on my phone brought me back from my thoughts. I'd received a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Maggie, it's David. I finally learned how to use a telephone. I'm really sorry about tonight. If you give me another chance, I'd love to try this over again. I'm coming to all of you for help. There's something not right about David. I can't get the look of his face out of my head. I'm not sure what I've gotten myself into going out with him. I don't know what he would have done to me if I had gone up to him. I also can't shake the feeling that what was on his hands weren't gloves.